So I spend a lot of my time talking with entrepreneurs, and it's rare that when someone brings up a book about business, I haven't heard of it. And this is a book that I literally never, ever hear people talking about. Okay. And the book is called The $12 Million Stuffed Shark: The Curious Economics of Contemporary Art. It's by Don Thompson. And among other things, this book is about a $12 million stuffed shark. Specifically, it's about a piece of art by this artist named Damien Hirst. And in the process of the book, it basically reveals the crazy stuff that goes on in the contemporary art market. But this video is not going to be about contemporary art, my thoughts on it. What it's going to be about is how this tiny little market, this little tiny pocket, is in many ways a perfect petri dish to just learn a ton about human nature, about psychology, and about entrepreneurship, because everything in there is turned up to 10. Okay, it reveals everything: the brands, the personalities, the value, the price, and there is a ton that we can learn about it that you can apply to your business if you're paying attention. So today I'm going to break down a bunch of lessons that I learned. I've now read this book twice. I read it for the first time about, I don't know, maybe 7 years ago, and I reread it again recently and was just shocked by the amount of insights, if you can pay just a little bit of attention and read between the lines about what's going on in the book. Okay, so the book centers around this piece of art, which is called The Physical Impossibility of Death in the Mind of Someone Living. My abstraction is this, but basically what it is a work by an artist named Damien Hirst. He's a contemporary artist. Mind you, this book came out in 2010, so it's now 15 years old. So we are looking at a snapshot of a market 15 years ago. This is before NFTs, this is before social media, but everything still stands. In a lot of ways, the contemporary art market was early to a lot of the things that have become more common knowledge now. So in the book, he has a quote that I think says a lot. He says, "Money complicates everything in contemporary art." And the second that dollars and cents enter the conversation about art, it reveals everything. It reveals everything about human nature, about business, about money, about greed, about value. There's a lot to go there. So I'm not going to use this video to talk about art. I am a huge art fan. I actually love contemporary art as well. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the art market and what we can learn from a very unusual submarket, which is this market of high-end contemporary art. Okay, so today I'm going to break down the lessons that I learned from this book and how you can apply them to your business, to entrepreneurship. There's going to be a lot to learn, so let's jump into it, shall we? I'll be using my iPad here to hopefully illustrate some of the journey. So the first lesson, the number one lesson that is revealed in this book, is this correlation between brand and prices. So stronger brand, okay, equals higher prices. And this is a lesson that we see very, very early on. In the art world, artists essentially become brand names, which lets them charge astronomical prices for work that maybe some people would argue is worth it or not worth it. That's not up to me to decide. I'm, like I said, I'm a fan of contemporary art, but obviously you have those people that are like, I could do that. It's just paint on the wall or whatever. Or, oh yeah, you took a stuffed shark and put it in, a vat of formaldehyde, which is this piece from Damien Hirst. But Damien Hirst's response, would be like, well, I did it and you didn't. And I think that's a fair response. So the lesson here is no matter what kind of business that you're running, cultivating a brand can be a game changer. And the reason why this is so important is brand does a lot of things. At the end of the day, when you're trying to charge higher prices, when you're trying to get more clients, when you're trying to grow your business, um, all of sales is basically a referendum on the trust that you have with the person who's purchasing, right? So they're making a decision about whether the value that you're providing is greater than the price that you're charging. And the question is there trust there that the value is being represented correctly? And when you have a brand, which in a lot of ways, a brand is social proof, right? Like us as humans, we are tribal creatures. So when we see a big group of people all doing something, we have this thing deep in our brains, especially if it's like people that we trust or we feel like are like us. Um, we will kind of just project ourselves onto those people and be like, oh, okay, well, if so and so trusts this person and I trust them, then I trust the person that they trust, right? Um, so this reputation, right, and this trust and this perceived value can be represented through brand, right? A trusted, recognizable brand is going to signal to the buyer that there is quality there because there is this track record. And what we see over and over in the world of contemporary art is that collectors will pay more for a quote branded artist's work, and in your business, customers are going to pay more for products from companies with a reputation. And another book that I love is called, let me not butcher the name, it's called Positioning for Professionals. Okay. And in here, there is a chart that I will poorly replicate that I think is the most important thing. So here's our chart, right? Okay. So over here is price. All right. And this is percentage of market. Now, this was done, a study in 2008 by Peter Walsh and Helen Fearn. Okay. The study was called Brand Equity and the Bottom Line. And this chart is basically everything that you need to know here. Okay. So, as market share increases, generally speaking, we see price decrease, right? So this is what you would see with a normal company right here. All right. But there's actually a second line that happens. And this is the line of companies that have high brand equity. And what we're seeing here, and this is a pretty detailed study that was done, is a price premium due to brand. All right, so there's actually a massive gap in how much you can charge just if you have a strong brand. And we see this at the highest levels of the contemporary art world, right? You might have one canvas that just looks like, I don't know, some red splatters. Um, and if it's from, the dude down the street, market value is probably going to be, $0. But if it's from a branded artist, right? And I'm just messing around. Like I've got art books of people drawing red splotches. So but branded artist, right? With the trust, who knows? $1 million, right? So stronger brand equals higher prices. This brand that we create increases trust and perceived value. So in 2010, it was becoming clear that like brand is probably a good strategy to have not only for companies, right, investing in a strong brand, but for individuals, because at the end of the day, like having a brand is more valuable than ever. Okay. Just as true for individuals it is for art or products. So the more that you can have this reputation, because in a lot of ways, like your brand is your reputation, right? And we'll talk more about that in a second. It can make a huge difference on the price that you can charge. So I want to just extrapolate out the lesson here. So we see that branded artists are able to command much more in this high stakes contemporary art market. But for you listening to this right now, I need you to understand that brand equals higher prices. Okay. And this can mean your brand or this can mean the brand of your clients. A lot of you who are watching this do work that impacts the brand of your clients. And I know a lot of my clients that do like branding work, design work, creative work. It's difficult to sometimes communicate the tangible ROI of the work that you're doing. And all you really need to show your clients is that brand commands a higher price premium. All right. So this is a huge distinction here and something that like most designers, creative people are not communicating to their clients that like brand affects the bottom line. So this is hugely significant. Okay. Brand commands a higher price. And the stronger the brand, the higher the price. Oh, and why are high prices important, right? Because high prices are the lever that changes. So price is up. Okay, what does that do? It means profits are up. Okay, all else equal. And when you have more profits, you can do things like scale, hire a team, invest in the business. You have more headroom to innovate because you're not always thinking about how to close more and more clients. So if we're thinking downstream all the way backwards from I want to increase profit in my business, all the way back here, we have brand. And it's something to think about. Brand is not something that is easy to just be like, oh, okay, I have a brand and I'm done. You know, there's a lot that goes into it because it's a reputational thing. But the artists that are taking up the lion's share of the market, the reason that they're able to do it is because they have a strong brand and it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. All right, second one. This is huge. We're going to talk about money and price again here. So the second one, high price creates value. Okay. In contemporary art, this is something that you see over and over again. A high price tag itself confers significance. So in the book, he literally says expensive work becomes meaningful in part because it is expensive and not the other way around, right? So people assume a costly piece must be important, which creates this self-fulfilling cycle where price drives the prestige, right? It looks like this. High price drives the prestige, which in turn, sorry for my bad handwriting. This isn't a video about how I'm good at art. It drives the price and it creates this self-fulfilling cycle. So this is actually a hack that you can apply to your business. That the higher prices that you have, it creates this really virtuous self-fulfilling prophecy. And to go back a second, I actually learned that there is a term from this that they talk about in the book, and it's called the Veblen effect. All right. So if we go back in economics land for a second here, and we want to talk about price and we want to talk about quantity. Okay. You remember this? Did we do economics in high school? Um, Normal demand curve when the law of demand holds, right? As price goes down, quantity increases, right? So this is like normal demand curve. But Veblen goods, which contemporary art, high priced luxury type products, actually behave completely different from the law of demand. Okay, so what you see is it's an inverted curve. So a Veblen curve basically looks like this. Okay, and as the price increases, demand increases for the right people with the right market. So we see how certain products tend to be perceived as more desirable because of how expensive they are. So price is actually creating value and buyer satisfaction rather than reflecting it. This is very unusual. Think about luxury handbags. Think about contemporary art. Think about the shark in the tank, right? Think about super expensive cars, ultra fine dining, right? Where you're like, oh, I went out to dinner at this tasting menu and it was $995 and it tasted amazing. And did it taste amazing because it tasted amazing? Or did it also taste amazing because it was extremely expensive? And as a result, that price created the value and this perception, which then had this positive feedback loop where it made your enjoyment actually go up. All right. So this is a really weird glitch in how humans think. And it basically creates this situation where demand increases and price increases at the same time. This is only for certain goods, but in the primary art market, this is from the book. Price creates value and buyer satisfaction rather than reflecting it. Okay, so this is the Veblen effect. The higher the perceived price, the more valuable the object is seen to be and the greater buyer satisfaction. So, what can we learn from this? How can we apply this to our business? All right, number one, that's important to remember is there is a strategic benefit to charging higher prices. Okay. As you raise your prices for the right kind of buyer, for the person that sees the value in what you're doing, there can actually be more benefit in charging higher prices over time. Okay. Because people look at the high price and they see that as a signal that it's important. Now, I'll talk more about some of the other ways that price can impact like buyer value in a second. But we also see in the artwork that expensive work tends to be valued as more expensive because it's expensive. So it creates a self-fulfilling cycle where price drives prestige, which then in turn justifies the price. So when you price your product, you want to be thinking about like, is there a strategic benefit to high prices for me? Okay. Something to think about. Okay. And this price level can signal to the market. So Ron Baker wrote a great book. If you haven't read it, it's kind of heady, but it's called Implementing Value Pricing. And in the book, Ron says that price signals what the firm believes it is worth. So when you are going out into the market and you are slapping a high price tag on there, you are communicating to the market that we are the best, that we believe we are at the top of the market, that this price is a signal to everyone. Hey, we are the real deal. It signals the reputation. It signals the status of the firm. It signals the status of the person who's buying it. And for the people who want the best, right, that product becomes more desirable. Okay. And when you play this low price game, you're signaling something completely different to the market because at the end of the day, price is a signal. Low prices signal to the market inexperience, risk, right? Sometimes it can signal value, right? But it all depends on how you are perceived, okay? And often charging more can actually increase conversions as you go higher if the offer and positioning are aligned. So it's something to think about, right? We all know how to sell things for cheap, right? You can go look at Walmart, and Walmart is playing the game of efficiency. Okay. And their strategy is we will be the best in the world at efficiency so we can keep the prices as low as possible so that we can capture more demand, right? So what we're seeing is freaking Walmart's hanging out right here on the demand curve. You know what I mean? But like if you're a solopreneur, if you're like self-employed, you're not Walmart. You're never going to beat them at the efficiency game. So maybe we should take a look on the other curve and ask ourselves, well, how can I be the best at something? And how can I signal to the market that I'm the best and attract the people who want to work with the best? Something to consider. Okay. Number 3. This is called value by association. All right. And this is basically, you ever heard the phrase, your network is your net worth? um, well, it's a thing. All right. So this goes back to brand as well, but in the contemporary art crazy world, collectors seek validation through association with respected art world names. So when you buy from a renowned dealer or a prestigious auction house, so some of the auction houses that are very prestigious are like Christie's, Sotheby's, it boosts the perceived value. So what you see is like boosting the perceived value can happen by, all right, buying from a dealer with a brand, buying from an auction house with a brand, or buying from, and we'll talk about in a second, buying a piece with prestigious provenance. And I'll tell you what that means in a second because it's very interesting. Okay, so the artwork's provenance is basically its ownership in exhibition history. So we're not even looking just at, okay, well, what is the value of this piece of art? Does it make me happy? Do I like it? We're not looking at that at all. We're actually looking at the track record of where this piece of art has been before. So, it's like, okay, well, it's Joe, rich guy, owned it. And then he passed it over to the MoMA where it was exhibited for a while. And then it got passed over to, another museum. And somehow now it's in your house, right? This story, the story of ownership and exhibition, can dramatically increase the desirability. Okay. So, because that art market is driven by branding and reputation, a famous gallery or an auction house attached to an artwork can instantly elevate its price. So, in the book, he actually says, this is so crazy. The same general type of piece of art at an unknown gallery. Okay, so unknown gallery might fetch 4 grand. Okay, but you take the same piece and you put it at a top tier gallery, it could run 12K for a top tier gallery. So what we're seeing this goes back to what we were just talking about, 3x price premium for brand, for reputation, right? Um, and this is just purely due to the gallery's name. And why are these, big brand galleries or auction houses able to do this? Well, because of reputation. And in the contemporary art world, reputation and the brands of artists, dealers, auction houses, and collectors often supplement the intrinsic value of the artwork itself. Because at the end of the day, branding, right, creates trust. Brand equals trust. And the reason that someone would pay 12K instead of 4K for a top tier gallery is because there is the trust that this gallery believes this art is worth this much. And it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where because there's more trust, the prices go up. And as a result, this can significantly increase prices and create a sense of legitimacy for artists. Because at the end of the day, collectors are seeking validation for their purchases. And when they feel like there's less risk, right? Trust equals less risk. When they feel like there's less risk because they bought from a prestigious gallery, or bought it from, the collection that was shown in a museum or owned by a famous collector, right? You'll hear that talking, or bought at a high profile auction house. Um, People are going to feel like there's less risk associated with the investment that they're making. Okay. And the last thing that I want to lead with here. So, how can you be associated with people who have trust, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is one of these hacks where, like, there can be a transference of trust from someone that you are associated with to you. And there's the other one. There's this concept that I want to remind you of that is extremely, extremely powerful. And they talk about this in the book. And this is the idea of, this is a bad drawing, but a, sorry, don't know how to draw. Um, Price anchor. Okay. So one of the examples that they use in the book that I thought was pretty interesting is, what they'll do is they will put the work of a minor artist up on the wall in a gallery next to a major artist or valuable artist, right? And the price might be lower, right? It might be, I don't know, 5K versus 50K. Um, but because it's sitting next to the work of a major artist, the perceived value goes up. And if this thing was sitting on the wall by itself, who knows? It might only be worth 500 in a room with just the piece of art. But when there's this 50K price anchor right next door, and you have the brand and the prestige being transferred from being like, oh, well, this is a like good because we're sitting on the walls next to each other. Um, this becomes instantly more valuable in the mind of the buyer. Okay. And that's a price anchor. So if you're using this in your business, one of the easiest ways that you can do it is lead with a very expensive price. You ever notice how when you go in to buy, like, I don't know, you go into a department store or something, and you're going to buy some expensive clothes or whatever, they'll usually like bring out something that's like way, 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 way too expensive, over your budget, and say, hey, just, try this on or whatever. Um, and then and then you're like, whoa, this is way outside of my budget. And then they're like, all right, we'll try this. And it's actually like, I don't know, double your budget or something like that. They do this at like car dealerships and stuff too. It's like, hey, take this one out for the test drive. And you're like, whoa, 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 I can't afford this. And then they give you something that is a little bit above your budget. And you're like, wait a second. This seems like a steal compared to this expensive thing. So it's all about like, where is the anchor in the price? Alrighty, next lesson. Keep scrolling. So this is something that I call the agent test or the agent gap, I will call it. And what you see a lot in the world of contemporary art, in the world of art in general, and this is just, it's not just art. So you see it with art, you see it with entertainment, you see it with sports, okay? And in all of these industries, there's this person that exists called an agent. And in the art world, sometimes it's called a gallery that represents you. And the purpose of the agent is to advocate for the economic value of the work of an individual. Okay, so a lot of times artists like to pretend like they don't want to play in the economic world at all. So they outsource that to a person, right? They are advocating, they're abdicating their responsibility and they're handing it over to this person who is an agent. So they can be like, oh, all I do is just sit in this room and I paint and I am free from this. And whatever happens magically in the market is not up to me because I'm just sitting here painting. And then, really, like the agent is doing the work of engaging with the market. And agents or managers, another term, advocate for the value of an artist's work. They're the one that goes to the market and says, this is an important piece of art. This is significant for these reasons. This has value for these reasons. Not only is it a good investment now, they are trending upward and it's going to be a better investment in the future. Okay? It's not likely that most artists would do this on their own, mainly, in my opinion, due to the hangups that they have about money. I've worked with a lot of really creative people in my career, and creative people have a really hard time advocating for the value of their worth. So they like to hand that over to someone else. But then they're not mad when the fruits of their labor come back, right? Especially if they have a great agent, it makes them a ton of money. They're not mad about that, right? They just don't feel like they can say it. All right. So we're going to talk about how to fix that. It's unlikely that most artists believe that their work is worth millions and they wouldn't go to the market to do it, but they have someone external to confirm it and advocate for it. And what I want to suggest is you should step into the role of being your own agent. And the way that I visualize this when I explain this to my clients, okay, is this is a timeline, this is a line, right? Dot, 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 dot. Okay. I call this the agent gap. And I think we can agree. So this is your price. And this is your agent's price. If you had the best agent in the world out there selling your work, what price do you think they can charge? I think more often than not, because I talk to my clients a lot about this, and I'll ask them, hey, like, and I'm not even the best by any means, but I'll ask them, hey, if I was selling your work to a client, do you think that I could charge higher prices than what you're currently charging now? Without a doubt, they say yes. And what we establish is there is this gap here that I call the agent gap. And the question you need to ask yourself is, if my agent could charge this price, why am I not charging it now? And that gap between the agent price is your price is the agent gap. And it reveals room for improvement, areas where you can work right now, like because agents aren't special, right? They have a set of skills and they use them. Um, and you can be your own agent, right? What I see with these artists is they abdicate this responsibility to other people, but I strongly suggest you start thinking about yourself as I am my own agent and closing that gap. So 3 areas that you can work on to improve this. Number 1, conviction. Do you believe in the value of your work? If you had an agent, they would be able to go out and sell it. Why do you not believe it? Why do you not believe in the value of your work to the market, to the right person? Sales. Once you believe it, you have to advocate for it. Can you advocate for the value of your work? Your agent's going to be able to go out there and they will literally hammer home and be like, no, this is important. This is valuable, right? Most people are not doing that for themselves. Okay. And then finally, self-esteem. And if you want to like dig in a little bit on this, there's a great book called, what is it? The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem. It's by Nathaniel Branden. If I got the title wrong, sorry. But you need to ask yourself, what internal beliefs are getting in the way of me doing this, of me having the conviction in the value of my work and advocating for the value of my work? And I suggest that if you do this, you will be unstoppable. This is a skill that you need to learn. And in the art world, and most creative worlds, they turn it over to someone else. But I am of the mind that I believe that there is a lot to be gained from stepping into the role as your own agent. Number 5. Okay. This is a huge area of leverage that most people feel like they are too busy and don't have the time to focus on. And that is network matters. Okay. In the contemporary art market, everything is basically propelled by a tight network of influential dealers, collectors, and curators. And I hate to break it to you, in your industry, whatever business world you're in, who you know and who endorses you can massively amplify your success. So if you are not at least thinking a little bit about the types of relationships that you have, you are really missing out on a massive lever for growing your business. And if you're not cultivating a network of mentors, industry influencer people, strategic partners that signal credibility to others, you are missing out. The contemporary art world is such a crazy, perfect microcosm of the rest of the regular world, and everything is ramped up all the way to level 10. But in your life, and I see this, like my clients that are connected and value relationships and value friendships, they just tend to do better. It's kind of like playing on easy mode. So if I were to suggest some of like the rules that we learn from contemporary art that allow life to go on easy mode, I think brand is a big one of them. I think price is a big one of them. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy for sure. I think network and value by association is a big one as well. And the last two that I'm going to talk about also apply to this as well. So stick around for that. Um, so, for example, like we see this in startup land all the time, right? Startup backed by a famous investor or partnering with a respected brand gives them immediate legitimacy. Same thing in the art world. Art backed by Charles Saatchi or sold through Sotheby's gains market trust right off the bat. So remember that network is a massive piece of leverage, and it's actually not super hard to build a network. Most people just don't do it because they don't have the time and space to think about it. And the reason they don't have the time and space to think about it, don't let me get started on the tangent here, but is because their prices aren't high enough. So they are just constantly stuck in fulfillment and they have no room to think, and they never make those big leveraged moves like focusing on brand, like focusing on network, like focusing on building relationships. Because I can tell you, most of the biggest needle movers in my business have come from me being in a position to pay attention to opportunities and signals that emerge. And that's because I've had the space in my life to have those opportunities show up. Okay. So network matters in art, in life, and in business. Huge leverage. Guess what? You probably already know this, but I bet you're not doing it. All right. Number 6 from the world of art that we can use and apply to our business in a big way. We are talking about scarcity. Scarcity is huge. When artwork is one of one, you can only have one copy of it, right? Scarcity is key to high art prices. There's usually only one of each masterpiece. And even for sometimes they'll do prints or editions, but dealers and artists carefully control the supply. And this perceived scarcity increases demand. It's psychologically because people often, pay a premium for something they believe is rare or unique. All right. So making something hard to get increases the desire for it. And if there is not some element of scarcity in your business, um, I recommend thinking about it. And I don't mean you should think about it from the perspective of, okay, well, this is how I can like manipulate people. I want you to think about it in terms of just the number one bottleneck for every entrepreneur solopreneur type person, um, is time. And then downstream of that is energy, right? Um, so if you are in your business and you know that your bottleneck is time and energy, it does not make sense to be approaching your business in a way where you think you have infinite time and energy. And I see this all the time. People just like imagine, oh, I'll get to it. I can do this and I can do this. I can do this. So I always recommend, and there's a whole video on this. You can find it on my YouTube channel. It's called 100K to 500K. Um, if you're going to grow your business, you need to fix some things and ignore some other things. And for most people, and this is the contemporary art way for sure, you want to think about scaling with price. And what happens when we decrease quantity, we increase price. All right. And we increase that demand. But you can also scale with marketing. I'm not going to talk about that in this video, but I talk about it there. Um, Basically, if you scale with price, you're living in the world of the contemporary art thing, right? Because you can only do so much work in a week or in a month or in a year. And as a result, it doesn't make sense to try to scale your business with quantity, with having more clients, with getting more products, um, if you are the person that has to fulfill on it. So, creating some level of scarcity. I only work with X amount of clients at a time. Um, I will only take on this many projects this year. One, increases demand, increases perceived value, right? Creates that. What did we talk about earlier? We talked about this price and prestige virtuous cycle that happens. The same thing happens when we have scarcity in our business, and scarcity is real, right? I hate to break it to you. You only have 40 hours a week or whatever if you're working 9 to 5. You only have so many hours, you only have so much energy. And part of entrepreneurship is figuring out how to use that energy in the most effective way possible. All right. So that's that one. And Art World does a great job of this, engineering scarcity. There's a lot of strategic limiting of supply in the art market where there are only X amount of pieces being released over the course of a year, or they may not even know when the next thing is going to be released. You also see this with like other luxury goods, like the big one that I always think about is the Hermes handbags, and how you basically have to build a relationship with the store in order to do it. And you have to buy all this stuff in order to just be put in line to potentially get a bag. And you might not even want to get the bag that you want, but you're going to buy it anyway because it's so scarce and it's so rare. All right. So, last lesson here from this book, number 7. People that pay attention. I really loved this uh, illustration of this in the book. So there are a couple of art collectors. Their names are Burton and Emily Tremaine. And they discovered this relationship between art and money because they actually went out and donated a large part of their collection to the museums. And isn't that nice of them? Like, they're giving back. They want the world to be able to see this art that they've collected and they spent all this money for. But what's crazy is when they donated it to the museum for free, okay, guess what happened? It ended up in long-term storage. Okay, it ended up in a freaking vault somewhere. And by the way, I think the number is somewhere between like 90 and 95% of art in the world of high quality art is in storage. It's not on display for you to see it. So when they simply gave it, it ended up in long-term storage. But when they sold it to the museum, how paradoxical, um, even at below market price, guess what happened? It was hung and promoted. So there's a huge, huge lesson here. So they decided that curators' most appreciated items for which they had to give up a large part of their acquisition funds. Okay. And a higher price made the painting easier to promote. So I need you to understand that people vote with their dollars and people that pay attention. So if you end up in this situation where like your clients are not taking your work seriously, where you feel like you always have terrible clients, it is possibly because you are not creating enough commitment for them to care financially. One of the things that I always think about, like, especially when I was running my design business, is like if someone isn't willing to devote a sizable, like a meaningful chunk of their annual budget to an initiative or to a project, it's probably not important to them. So let's say, there's 100% of the budget. So I don't know, there's $1 million annual budget, let's say. And, the budget is deployed to grow the business. That's like why businesses spend money so that they can make more money. Um, if they're only willing to spend, let's say, I don't know, 0.1% of that budget. So what's 0.1%? That's 1,000. Hopefully that's right. You can fact check me if it's not. If they're only willing to invest $1,000, I'm going to venture to say it's probably not that important to them. And as a result, you will most likely, your work will end up in long-term storage in the minds of your clients. So we need to create a situation where we're asking this client, like, hey, is this, let's say, since we talked about branding, is this branding project important to you? Right? Because it's not just the money. The money is just the exchange of value. But in order to have something work, we need buy-in. So, like, let's say, wouldn't it make sense to at least devote 5% of your budget to something that's important? So, one of the ways that you can see whether something is important is not in what people say, but what they do and how they deploy their capital, right? A brand that costs $250,000 is going to get a lot more attention than one that costs $2,500. Coaching that costs $100K is going to get a lot more action and commitment and likely results than one that costs 1,000. And honestly, like, in order to show commitment, it kind of needs to hurt. It needs to feel like an investment in order for people to treat it like an investment. It's just human nature. I mean, what could be easier than like, hey guys, hey museum, I'm giving you millions and millions of dollars of free art. Don't you care? And they're like, yeah, thank you so much. We're going to go put that in cold storage somewhere. And that's basically what your clients are doing when you're not charging high enough prices, right? You're not creating a situation where it is important for them to care and for them to be committed. All right. So next time these show up, remember, people that pay attention, and you should be creating a situation where if it's really important to your client, they are investing in a meaningful way so that you get that buy-in from them as well, the same way it happens in the contemporary art world. All right, so that's basically it. We have 7 lessons. All of these things came from this weird, wacky world of contemporary art. If you're interested, I recommend reading the book, $12 Million Stuffed Shark. It is 15 years old, so this is not the most up-to-date snapshot, but all of the lessons, all of the distinctions, they're exactly the same. And the last thing that I'll leave you with is so many people that I talk to in the business world think that they need to read more business books. And like business books are great. I've read most of them. And I like them. But what I see is that if you can expand a little bit out of the circle of business into other areas, and learn some stuff from it, and then apply it back to your area of expertise, you're able to really stand out in a way that most people do. Because most people just follow the same influencers, they read the same books, they follow the same plans, and there's just not a lot of innovation going on. And if you can take something like a book on a different topic, like let's say it's architecture, or I don't know, archaeology, or in this case, contemporary art, and then bring it around and apply it back to your business, I guarantee that you're going to have a much more unique perspective. And as knowledge becomes more and more, I want to say this wrong, information becomes more and more commoditized, point of view, taste, unique insights are going to be the gold and are going to be more rare. So I would just encourage you to, like, if you read a lot of nonfiction, step outside of the box and ask yourself, like, how can I apply these things back to whatever I'm focused on? And that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.